Terry Rasmussen, the Chameleon Killer. Part 1. 4 bodies, 2 barrels, and Terry Rasmussen's first lie. He could be anyone. The woods were still, the air dry and cold, just another quiet morning in rural New Hampshire. Until it wasn't. A man out walking stumbled upon something strange, something that didn't belong. A large, weathered 55-gallon drum, half hidden beneath fallen leaves in Bear Brook State Park. At first, he thought it was trash, but when he opened it, what he found would change the course of American criminal history. Inside were 2 bodies, one adult, one child, both partially mummified, wrapped in plastic, and stuffed into bags. There were no names, no ID. No one reported them missing. There wasn't even a clear cause of death. But one thing was certain. They were murdered. And for the next 15 years, no one would know who they were. No faces, no suspects, no answers. And it didn't stop there. Years later, another barrel would be found, more bodies, and the trail would lead investigators to a man who lived under dozens of fake names. A man who moved from town to town, slipping through the cracks. A man the FBI would one day call the Chameleon Killer. The Barrel in the Woods. It was November 1985, and the trees in Bear Brook State Park had already shed their leaves for the season. The forest was bare, quiet, the kind of place you'd forget existed if not for the occasional hiker or hunter passing through. One such hunter wandered off the main trail that day, not far from a rundown, burned-out store that had been closed for years. He was looking for deer. What he found instead was a barrel. It looked ordinary, dirty, scuffed. A large blue 55-gallon plastic drum, like the kind used for industrial chemicals. But something about it felt off. It wasn't hidden exactly, just left out in the open like trash someone dumped and never came back for. The hunter approached, noticing that the lid wasn't sealed all the way. And then he caught the smell. When investigators arrived, they found what he already knew. This wasn't trash. This was a grave. Inside the barrel were 2 bodies, the partially dismembered remains of a woman in her 20s or 30s and a girl around 9 or 10 years old. Both had been wrapped in layers of plastic and trash bags, then shoved into the barrel and left to rot. The scene was brutal. And the clues? Practically non-existent. No wallets, no clothing tags, no jewelry. Their teeth were in decent condition, enough to get dental records, but none matched any known missing persons. And the cause of death? Blunt force trauma. Violent, intentional, final. Back then, DNA testing was still in its early stages. Investigators checked thousands of records, missing women, runaway teens, mothers and daughters who'd vanished without a trace. But there was nothing. It was like these 2 people had never existed at all. And in a way, that was exactly what the killer wanted. The press dubbed the case the Bear Brook Mystery. But no one knew just how big the mystery really was. No names, no faces, no clues. For the investigators, it was a nightmare. 2 victims, 2 lives erased. and no one, not a parent, not a friend, not a neighbor, had come forward to report them missing. The woman was estimated to be between 23 and 33 years old. The girl, around 9 or 10, maybe a mother and daughter, maybe not. The forensic data gave them a timeline. They had likely been dead since the late 1970s or early 1980s, but their identities? A black hole. Police turned to the usual tools: dental records, missing persons reports, fingerprint analysis. They checked state databases, federal ones, even reached out to Interpol, hoping that maybe, just maybe, these weren't local victims. Nothing. They tried facial reconstructions, clay models, drawings, digital renderings, and distributed them to media outlets nationwide. Still, no one recognized them. Weeks passed, then months, then years, and the leads dried up. They became known only as Bear Brook Victim 1, Bear Brook Victim 2, faceless, nameless, frozen in time. Meanwhile, the barrel, that awful blue drum, was placed into evidence, labeled, stored, as if it were just another piece of trash someone forgot to throw away. But one thing kept investigators awake at night. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. This was planned. The plastic wrapping, the positioning, the location. Whoever did this had taken their time, had wanted them hidden, but not too far away. It was a message. And the worst part? They couldn't even tell who the message was for. The years turned into decades. The public moved on. The names Bear Brook became just another cold case. But the man responsible? He hadn't stopped. He was still out there, waiting, watching, changing his name, and preparing to strike again. The second barrel. By the year 2000, the Bear Brook case had become a ghost story. Old-timers in Allenstown still talked about it. The 2 bodies in the barrel found deep in the woods. But it felt more like lore than fact. 15 years had passed. And then, it happened again. A state trooper was training his police dog in the same area of Bear Brook State Park, barely 100 yards from the original crime scene. There, hidden under brush and debris, was another 55-gallon plastic barrel. Same shape, same size. And inside, 2 more children. Just like before, the victims were wrapped in layers of plastic and trash bags. Just like before, there were no identifying items, no wallets, no photos, no IDs. These girls were younger. One estimated to be about 3 years old, the other 2. And just like the first victims, both had died from blunt force trauma. Who were they? Why were they here? Investigators were stunned. Had someone really returned to the same dumping ground after all these years? Or had both barrels been placed there at the same time, and one just went unnoticed? Forensic teams moved quickly. This time, they had a powerful new tool, DNA analysis. And finally, a crack in the wall. Testing revealed that the adult woman from the first barrel was the biological mother of the oldest girl found in the second barrel. That meant the killer hadn't just murdered a woman and a child. He'd murdered a mother and at least one of her children, possibly both. The second girl? She wasn't biologically related, but the similarities, the method, the concealment, the location, suggested she was part of the same nightmare. So now, the tally stood at 4 victims: an adult woman, her daughter, another young girl, and one more girl, possibly another child, possibly unrelated. 4 people, 2 barrels, 0 names. But investigators were finally closing in. Because buried within the DNA was a connection, not just to the victims, but to the killer himself. The man with many names. As the DNA results painted a clearer picture of the victims, investigators started looking for someone who connected them all. And that's when an old case from across the country came back to life. A little girl named Lisa had been found abandoned in 1985 in a trailer park in Scotts Valley, California. She had been living with a man who called himself Curtis Kimball. He told neighbors the girl was his daughter. But something about him felt off. He was secretive, short-tempered, didn't stay in one place long. He worked as an electrician but never kept a steady job. No one could ever verify where he came from. And Lisa? She didn't speak much. She didn't go to school. She didn't even seem to know her real birthday. Eventually, Kimball abandoned her, and when authorities tested her DNA, the truth emerged. He wasn't her father. He had kidnapped her, and whoever her real mother was, she had vanished. Over the next 20 years, this man resurfaced again and again under different names. Curtis Kimball in California, Gordon Jensen in a mobile home park, Larry Vanner when he lived with a woman who mysteriously disappeared, Bob Evans on an employment record from New Hampshire. Every name came with a new face, a new location, and a new victim. Investigators began connecting the dots. They dug through old arrest records, court filings, DMV photos, Social Security files. The writing on the wall was chilling. Wherever this man went, women disappeared. And not just women, children. He inserted himself into single-parent households. He dated vulnerable women. He moved in fast, isolated them from family, then disappeared, sometimes with their kids. And always, he left no trace. This man was more than a drifter. He was a phantom, mastering the art of reinvention, hiding in plain sight, using charm and lies as his weapons. But there was one person he hadn't been able to erase: Lisa. And Lisa, the girl who lived, would become the key to unraveling his entire web of deception. Lisa, the girl who lived. They called her Lisa. That wasn't her real name. But it was the only name she had. The only identity left to her after being taken in by a man who stole everything else. She was just a child when she was rescued in 1985. She'd been living in squalor with a man who claimed to be her father, a man calling himself Curtis Kimball. He kept her isolated. Neighbors rarely saw her. And when they did, she seemed dazed, detached, like she was waiting for something, or someone. Eventually, after suffering injuries from neglect and abuse, Lisa was hospitalized. That's when the authorities stepped in. They ran the man's ID, and it didn't check out. They ran hers, and there was nothing to find. She had no birth certificate, no social security number, No family, no past. DNA proved one thing. He wasn't her father. But if he wasn't her father, who was? And where was her real mother? Lisa was placed into foster care. She eventually got adopted, grew up, went to school, tried to live a normal life. But the questions never went away. She remembered pieces, a woman's voice, a blue house, maybe a sister, but nothing concrete, just shadows. As she got older, Lisa gave a DNA sample. Investigators entered it into national databases. Nothing, for years. Until one day, something changed. With the rise of genetic genealogy, new doors opened. And in the 2010s, those doors finally led somewhere. Her DNA matched to distant relatives in New Hampshire. With careful mapping and triangulation, forensic genealogists pieced together her family tree, one leaf at a time. And at the root of it, a woman named Denise Baudin. Denise had gone missing in 1981. She was last seen in Manchester, New Hampshire with her boyfriend at the time, a man named Bob Evans. Lisa was her daughter, and the man who had stolen her, lied to her, abused her, and raised her under a false name, was Bob Evans. The killer had a new name, a new face, and for the first time in decades, a living victim was speaking. The genealogy breakthrough. For decades, detectives chased shadows. But Lisa's case, and her DNA, had opened a door. And now, with forensic genealogy evolving faster than ever, investigators weren't just identifying the victims, they were getting closer to unmasking the killer. The woman who disappeared with Bob Evans in 1981, Denise Baudin, was confirmed to be Lisa's biological mother. She had never been seen again. No body, no calls, nothing. Investigators feared the worst, and they had good reason to. Because now, with Bob Evans confirmed as the man who took Lisa, a new question emerged. Had he killed Denise too? The team turned their attention back to Bear Brook. They knew the victims in the barrels had likely died around the late 1970s to early 1980s, the same time Denise vanished. They uploaded the Bear Brook victims' DNA into public ancestry databases. And then, a match. One of the children in the second barrel, the one estimated to be around 2 years old, was a biological child of Bob Evans. That revelation hit like a bomb. He hadn't just kidnapped Lisa. He'd fathered children and murdered them. And the woman from the first barrel, the adult female, was identified as the mother of 2 of the girls. That meant Bob Evans had likely been in a relationship with her too. This wasn't just a man who killed strangers. This was a man who built fake families and then destroyed them. It was a chilling pattern. Find a vulnerable woman, move in fast, isolate her from friends and family, impregnate her or take in her children, then make them disappear. Each time, he changed his name, his appearance, his story. But the DNA couldn't lie. The man tied to the Bear Brook bodies, the missing mother, and the stolen child was one and the same. But what investigators didn't know yet was that his real name wasn't Bob Evans, not Curtis Kimball, not Gordon Jensen, not Larry Vanner. Those were just masks. His true identity was about to be revealed. The real name, Terry Rasmussen. The man who went by Bob Evans had left a trail of horror spanning decades. 4 bodies in barrels, a missing woman, and a kidnapped child. But after decades of aliases, lies, and reinvention, investigators finally had the tools to discover who he really was. In 2017, using a combination of fingerprints, military records, and archived arrest reports, the truth surfaced. His real name was Terry Peter Rasmussen. Born in 1943 in Colorado, Rasmussen had served in the U.S. Navy, stationed overseas before returning to civilian life in the late 60s. From there, his story spiraled into chaos. By the late 1970s, he was a full-blown drifter. He worked as an electrician, often under the table, never in one place for long. He traveled between Arizona, Texas, California, and New Hampshire, always leaving behind more questions than answers. What's worse, he didn't just assume new names. He blended into new lives. He dated women, introduced himself to neighbors, made himself seem helpful, even normal. But behind every alias, there were warning signs, domestic abuse reports, sudden disappearances of women he dated, arrests for DUIs, fraud, abandonment, under names that didn't exist. Each time the law caught up, he vanished. Changed states, changed stories, became someone new, and the murders followed him. When investigators looked back, they realized Rasmussen had been living in New Hampshire around 1978 to 1981, the exact time the Bear Brook victims were believed to have been killed. He was also the last person seen with Denise Boudin before she vanished, and he was convicted, under the name Larry Vanner, for the 2002 murder of Yoon Jun, a woman he'd been dating in California. Her dismembered body was found in a basement. It was the only murder he was ever formally charged with. He died in 2010 in a California prison. Cause of death, lung cancer. And he took countless secrets with him. For the first time, police had a name, a real one, and they had victims. But what they still didn't have was a full picture of his crimes, because the body count, it was almost certainly higher. The victims, the unanswered questions, and the dark legacy. In the end, the name Terry Rasmussen was just the beginning, because what he left behind was something much darker. 4 bodies in 2 barrels, a woman, her 2 daughters, and a 4th girl, a child no one has ever identified. She was between 2 and 4 years old, not Rasmussen's biological child, not Marley's Honeychurch's either. The woman believed to be the mother of the other 2 children. She remains to this day the unknown child. No name, no family, no one who ever came looking for her. Just a death certificate and a grave. Then there's Denise Boudin, Lisa's mother. She vanished in 1981, shortly after Thanksgiving. Her last known companion? Bob Evans, Rasmussen in disguise. She has never been found. Her body has never been recovered. Investigators believe she was murdered, but they can't prove it. And what about Yoon Jun, the woman Rasmussen killed in California in 2002? She was dismembered, stored in cat litter, left in a basement. Her murder is what finally landed him in prison. but it came decades too late. And here's the part that still haunts cold case detectives. There are likely more victims. Terry Rasmussen lived in at least 5 different states, used over a dozen names, fathered children who disappeared, dated women who vanished. He was a predator with a blueprint. Target single mothers, build trust, erase them, and he did it with terrifying efficiency. But he never bragged, never explained, never confessed. He simply changed names and kept moving. His goal wasn't just to kill, it was to erase. To delete people from the world so completely, no one even noticed they were gone. But in the end, he couldn't erase everyone. Because Lisa lived. She was the thread he couldn't cut, the one piece of his story that survived. And through her, the mystery unraveled. The Bear Brook case changed everything. It was the first time in U.S. history that forensic genealogy was used to identify both victims and their killer. It became a blueprint for how cold cases could be solved, not just with bullets or fingerprints, but with family trees. And it left us all with a chilling question. How many more Terry Rasmussens are out there, living under fake names, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to find the next barrel in the woods? This was part 1 of the Chameleon Killer, and we're just getting started. This is the American Mysteries Archives. See you in part 2. Subscribe for more chilling mysteries. Thanks for being here. See you in the next time.